Does Heartbeat have a position on equal protection laws?
If you're going to attract them and also advocate to criminalize their actions relative to abortion, those things work at odds.
There's life decisions and then there's life saves.
In some ways, what you're arguing for is that we would have whole centers that are dedicated only to those that are actively planning to abort. Like, oh, hey, no, sorry, we're only dealing with abortion-determined women today. Can you come back when you're more abortion-determined? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
There's several of them out there. Do you disagree with that model?
Pregnancy centers aren't here to stop abortion, but we are here to stop abortions, right? We're doing it one woman at a time. We are touching lifetimes, and then beyond that, we're touching lineage.
I'm going to throw something out there. You tell me what you think on it.
Hold on. You just hit a word that just rankles me.
Welcome back to Pro Life Unfiltered. I'm your host, Benjamin Kraft. This is Bold Conversations for those building the movement. We're joined by Jor-El Godsey, who I don't think needs any introduction, but just in case you're living under a rock, he's the president of Heartbeat International and oversees the Abortion Pill Rescue Network, as well as Option Line and other awesome initiatives. Welcome, Jor-El.
Good to be with you, Benjamin, as always.
Yeah, so I was busy in the conference, exhibitor section at the Heartbeat conference. Didn't get to hear, but heard you had a firecracker of a keynote speech. You described the present moment of the pro-life movement as a blockbuster Netflix moment. Tell me more about what you meant by that.
Yeah, well, some of us weren't around when that actually happened, probably present company included. So Blockbuster at one time had 9,000 stores. It was the thing to do. Friday nights, you go to the movies, or you go check out a movie on something we knew back then as VHS. Again, I don't know, Benjamin, we come from different generations.
I'm a 90s kid.
Okay. So VHS, you still know, but that was the whole experience, and it was the way that you access movies when you didn't actually go to the theater, right? So then along came this company called Netflix, and I know that there was some corporate dealings, and Netflix came along with a different way to deliver the content. So they weren't changing the movies; they were just delivering. They were changing the way movies were delivered. So at that time, initially, Netflix was basically sending out DVDs, and so not VHS but DVDs. They could be mailed, right? So they could actually get to someone's inbox. So you didn't have to go to a store. You didn't have to go to the Blockbuster. I mean, it was a real tactile experience to go and pick it out, and then you had to return the VHS. But suddenly Netflix was creating a whole different way to deliver the same value, but right to the door, right to the happening. And this is what we are facing in the pregnancy help movement, is that the abortion industry is changing the way it's delivering. And you know this very well. You've been working on this, the kind of how do we help intercede and intervene into these moments where chemical abortion is now being accessed and delivered right to the doors of individuals. And I would contend that the movement, the abortion movement, has actually been working to flank the pregnancy help movement. The pregnancy centers have been making a difference now for, we've been around, for 50 years. But I think we saw the vast expansion of pregnancy help centers, in particular, in the mid 80s, and they begin to really take hold in the 90s, and that's when we saw the actual abortion numbers begin to decline, and they declined steadily over about 25 years, maybe a little longer. Almost 30 years, they declined 3% per year, which sounds like not much, but actually 1.6 million abortions in 1991. By the time we get to 2015 or so, we're at half of that. So the pregnancy help movement was a significant player, and we've actually had a board member publish on this, and it was published in the Federalist, an actual relationship of how pregnancy center engagement, as it grew, the number of abortions declined. Now, not as fast as we want it, not as much as we want it, but that's a big deal. We cut into their market by half. Like, we took half of their market share, or at least a portion of that half. And that's what then the movement began, the abortion world, big abortion, began to say to themselves, I believe, how do we keep that from happening? So the whole introduction of chemical abortion and the fact that it can be accessed without going to a physical location, it can be delivered without going to a physical location, and then of course it can happen outside of a physical location. All of those things were around physical locations, and yet for us, the pregnancy help centers are primarily have a physical brick and mortar mentality. And that has served us, and it's served us well for many years. And it needs to stay. Like that's the other thing is like it needs to continue to anchor it because unlike unlike those in the big abortion world, it's going to take more than one moment to make a difference, right? They only need one moment. It's kind of like the conversation about terrorists, and maybe there's a parallel there for sure. Is the terrorist only need to succeed once, right, to create an act of terror, and the abortionist only needs to succeed once to finish the abortion. But when we succeed, we need to not just help her choose life once, we need to help her continue to choose life as she walks through her pregnancy. And that's something that the brick and mortar are phenomenally helpful with. But we're going to have to do better. We're going to have to meet her beyond the brick and mortar. Outside of that, we're going to have to meet her beyond the clock that the brick and mortar ties us to. And that means meeting her in virtual ways, bringing more meaningful ministry. And so we've made some moves to help that happen. We are certainly encouraging more of our pregnancy health center folks to get beyond their brick and mortar so that they can see greater impact. And that's where I see if we don't, we could become like Blockbuster. We need to recognize that we need to move, and that the abortion industry is doing that on really calling us to do better about that.
I agree with the comparison, by the way, terrorism and abortion.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yes, I'm good with that. But so would you essentially be saying that we need to do telemedicine appointments, options consultation before they even show up, or what is missing? What do we need to pivot towards?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We need to bring our loving, compassionate outreach to her more fully than just answering the phone saying, "Hi, we are happy to help you. Can we make an appointment for 3 days from now or 2 days from now?" We need, it's just something that some of our friends already in the movement are piloting and pioneering. They're showing it can be effective. There are folks that are doing this right now. But not enough of us. That's our challenge. Is we need more people to be doing this. We need more people to be bringing more meaningful ministry in that moment whenever she's reaching us, right? So that
Yeah.
if you're just answering the phone with a warm, and look, we do this at Option Line all the time. We do it, 1,500 times a day. We're talking to someone to say, we can help you. And let us point you to the pregnancy center. But we need to all do more to help her in that moment. So we need to actually bring the intake opportunity to her in that moment. So where we're saying, not just saying, "Can I help you?" but "How can I help you right now? How can we talk about this? How can I understand you better? What you're in the very things that we would do in the brick and mortar for that appointment at 10 o'clock on Thursday. We need to at least start that conversation more meaningful in the first point of engagement when we're talking to her.
Okay, so what's the value proposition to the potential client when you're talking to her about this appointment? Like, what's she gonna get? That's the common marketing thing. What's in it for me? Right. So, walk me through the deliverables of that telemedicine appointment.
Well, primarily, we're going to help open her options, right? Because typically, as we know from our training that's been around forever, and it's very true that in a situation where she can see no other option, right? Her options begin to narrow. It becomes like a tunnel or like a funnel, and she can only see one path, and that's exactly what big abortion really preys upon is that they're creating that scenario. It's like, "Oh, honey, you can't do this. You can't do all of this. Your dreams are at risk. You need to immediately move to an abortion." So that's what exactly she sees is just that one path forward. So the very least we need to bring is a warm, friendly, caring voice about her and her options, her dreams and her future that we can then begin to walk her through the fact that there are other options. In our world, it's the love approach, right? So we listen and we learn that then it's we open options because that's the key that allows us then to introduce vision and values and then extend and empower. So we need to bring that understanding, the very thing that all of us do in the pregnancy centers in that initial intake is we begin to explore with her what her situation, what is she looking at? What is she hoping for? And then how can we help her see a better future than abortion for sure? And so that's our opportunity. And we just need to bring that to her quickly. Again, we do this at Option Line all the time. We don't, we're looking to hand her to someone who can spend more time with her. So that, that few minutes on the phone setting appointment is not serving us the way it did for 25 years. It needs now to be more meaningful. So we've actually stood up something called the high risk response network. So if centers have someone, like they might have a nurse that can work even from, say, they close their doors at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. If they can have someone available to take calls from 5 to 8, that's another prime time. Catch her, in that 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock time frame, or over the weekends. Those are just Saturdays when there are abortions happening on Saturdays, and yet most that our studies show that we're best at being open and available in our brick and mortar for appointments from Monday through Thursday. About 80% of all of our centers are open from 10 to 4, maybe 5 if we're good, on Monday through Thursday. And then when we get to Friday and Saturday, our numbers drop off significantly. But what we've learned from the Abortion Pill Rescue Network is that that's the time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, is when most women are actually pursuing or even taking the abortion pill. So while our option line numbers tend to mirror the kind of calls and centers Monday through Friday. They start high Monday, they begin to tail off on Friday, but then the exact opposite happens at the Abortion Pill Rescue Network, as they start low and they end high as we move into the weekend. So that's showing us that the pattern of women, as they're actually approaching that decision or actually activating on that decision, that taking that abortion pill, is changing. And we need to get out of our brick and mortar thinking, that business hour mindset, and really begin to think about when she's looking to make that decision, and how does she find help to help her see something other than the option of abortion.
Hmm. For a pregnancy center who's looking to do this type of thing, but is trying to prioritize and allocate the resources of their staff, what do you think is more important for the facilitator of these telemedicine appointments? Someone who has that nursing background or medical background, or the most equipped person in terms of triaging and talking over the phone and counseling these deeply abortion minded women in terms of scripting, off the cuff responses, things like that?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Like, whoever's willing to step into that role. We look, we want to bring our best to the moment. I get that, but our best is whoever will be able to be available. So while we would certainly celebrate nurses being able to be that, that's our. There's a strong like cultural reality, that nurses are the most widely respected profession. When you're talking to a nurse, that's very important. We're doing the same thing. Certainly with our abortion rescue network, we're abortion pill rescue network. We're actually bringing nurses to that conversation. But frankly, it could be anybody who is trained to walk with her, love her, care for her, get her to that next step. Which obviously we can't do ultrasound, from a distance. That we still haven't figured out how to do that. Maybe that's coming in the next iPhone release. Who knows? But we need to get people who can bridge her to that moment so that she doesn't act on the abortion, because that's exactly what the chemical abortion proponents are doing. Big abortions trying to run her quickly at that decision. They're trying to move on the impulse buy. We all have that. We all have made purchases that we said, why did I do that? Like, I didn't really want that. It wasn't something I really wanted, but I did it because it was easy. It was simple. And that's what big abortions have been doing. Look, by the way, we do them a favor when we refer to their abortion provision of chemical abortions as telehealth. There's no health in any of that, or virtually any of it. It's a mail order transactional scenario where we were talking to one of the APR moms that we had who actually successfully reversed her abortion through progesterone APR. And she said that she just filled in a few fields in their form and took a picture with her license. And then that was it. Then they were and made payment, and then the pills were shipped to her within 48 hours.
I'm
This
surprised
is
they
how.
even had her put her license in.
Yeah, I mean, that was one example. The stuff that Dr. Francis and others and plenty of centers have done this themselves. They've seen how limited information is necessary to obtain these abortion pills. So they're just making it simpler and easier and less. They're making it frictionless for her to make that decision. So we have to bring something to that moment, because the next moment, the abortion is only a click away. And so that's why we need to bring more meaningful conversation to her. It doesn't necessarily have to, this is where we have to figure out what is the right amount of time that we can do, but we have to bring more to that moment than an answering machine for sure, or a something that is lacking more depth to really exploring with her what her options are.
Sure. Yeah, so I would agree with you that, whoever's willing, but whoever's going to be the best on the phone, whoever's going to be the best, most able to counsel, even if they're not a nurse, I don't know how you guys do it. You could tell me, but, obviously it's a bonus in terms of a marketing play to say you're going to talk to a nurse. But
Yes,
in
of
terms of the
course.
practicalities of it, one, I've never seen the data that the conversion rate's necessarily going to for sure be higher if you say nurse versus options consultation or counselor or whatever. Maybe there is, but either way, you're not supposed to give medical advice but are you on these telemedicine appointments or it's more so just options? It's not
Well,
medical advice.
when you use the phrase telemedicine, I'm not a lawyer. I think these terms, telehealth, telemedicine, we would say telecare, gives us the most flexibility as far as a term is concerned. Certainly, if you're bringing a nurse, then you can use the telemedicine. That is probably your safest play. But as far as we would say, it's telecare. That way, whoever she's talking to, and this also assumption that that a nurse is going to be the only one she's talking to. Well, that changes, right? When we actually turn her over to a sonographer, and someone who's trained in ultrasound is a sonographer. Maybe they're an RDMS, but they're not a nurse, right? Is that telecare? Is that telemedicine? Is that telehealth? These are all good questions. But from a general sense, I would say it's a telecare visit. We are caring for her from a distance. It's virtual. And by the way, that doesn't, that could be phone, that could be a video conference, that could be all kinds of things. We want to allow for that. That's how the abortion industry is doing it. They're making it, they're using every path possible to get her to choose the abortion. So we need to be as aggressive in that sense of taking our compassionate ministry into that environment, into that kind of online, virtual, digital environment. However we can do that, we want to make that happen. We need to make it happen. Otherwise, we're going to be that Blockbuster on the corner that's not getting the traffic that we want.
Yeah. So telecare, not necessarily telemedicine, unless it's a actual nurse on there. I like that. It's a good broad term, safe term,
Yeah.
telecare. Your words, guy, words matter to you. Definitions matter to you. I like
You
that
know
about
that.
you. Speaking of which, I posted a video towards the end of last year. We had a great conversation about it. It was a provocative one. I basically said that pregnancy help centers were going through a bit of an identity crisis, or at least some of them were. And I contrasted the difference between pregnancy health centers who existed with their sole focus of saving lives from abortion, and those that were more focused on providing resources. I said both are valuable, but know which one you are, and own that and be honest about that to your board and to your donors. And you had reached out, which I really respected. You provided, you didn't see eye to eye on all these things. And we talked through it. And by the end of it, I realized that it seemed we were pretty much on the same page. It was more so about the words themselves that I was using, because I had used the word life-saving pregnancy center or something like
Yep.
that. And you had referred to them. You said, I like to break them out into intervention centers. And there was the other one that I don't remember the name. It wasn't help. What do you remember the name of it?
Probably a support center, like a
Support
pregnancy support.
centers. That's right.
Yeah.
So, I said I'm happy to use that. I picked up that term, or I've kind of done a hybrid. I've been referring to them as life-saving intervention centers, or so. Um, so you've got intervention centers, you got support centers. Both are necessary, both are important. But I think it's also, very important to know which one you are, because sometimes people they're kind of they don't really know what their North Star is. They might not even have a mission statement or a vision, et cetera, et cetera. So on that, how would you define these two sort of categories of valuable ministries?
Well, I would say that the pregnancy help movement, by design and by definition, is intervention minded, right? We are seeking to intervene into a situation that, if there was no intervention, could lead to the death of that child, and the harm and hurt of that woman that's pregnant. So you have, in my mind, it's a difficult conversation to kind of tease out that there are pregnancy centers that are not intervention at their core. Now, you raise a good point. Like, are we clear enough with ourselves on what we're doing? Is it achieving that goal? Like, that is a big question. It's a good question. And you went on, Benjamin, to really highlight the how is that translating to your marketing decisions. And so I'm going to set aside the marketing conversation and just talk about the mission. The mission of Pregnancy Help is very much one of reaching into lives where we want to help bring life-saving work. Now, the question that you were raising, and you used a very, I think, a provocative definition of what it means to be life-saving, is part of the conversation, and that we need to have. Some of us, this is you're not new to this. As far as, I mean, I hate to break it to you, you weren't the first one to come up with challenging what it means to be what is a life decision. What does that mean? Sometimes I think we want it to be very dramatic. If I set aside chemical abortion and go back 20 years, like, we want her to have gotten off the table, from the off the abortion table, and run out the building, and that's a life saved, because, like, she was right there at death's door, to be sure. But the truth is, anywhere we can intervene and redirect her path, and sometimes it's actually easier, in a sense, to redirect her path earlier. Then the more hardened she comes to abortion, then she's going to end up with our other statistic, which is the abortion pill reversal, where we have to now intervene because she's not thinking about it. She's already started her abortion, right? So, there's nothing more life-saving than abortion pill reversal. But I would contend, like, I'm going to use a difficult illustration. If she's intent upon suicide, for instance, like, again, I hate using this, but it really helps define this for our folks. And we say, if we're convinced ourselves that the only way that life was saved was if we prevented her from jumping off the building. It's like, okay, I can agree. But what about if we helped her not to get out of the elevator that went all the way to that top floor? What happened if we help her not get on the elevator that went to the top of that floor? What happens if aren't those also life-saving? And so, like, we move that back. Like, look, if we can intervene earlier in her thought processes and bring life-giving ministry into her, open those options sooner, so that we're not trying to stop her at the last minute. We're actually redirecting her sooner. I would contend that all of those are life-saving efforts and opportunities. Now, they're not good about choosing what marketing you want. I would agree. And that's where I appreciate, your kind of helping us focus on what makes for good marketing, because I believe when we do market to the abortion-minded woman, we will capture some of the others. But if we're not careful and we market to all the others, then we'll not capture as many abortion-minded women. I totally
Sure.
agree with that. But from a governance perspective and from a ministry perspective, I want to make sure that we're taking every opportunity to find her in her point of vulnerability. Whether we would say that she's at risk for abortion, and it's a wide spectrum. But if we can intervene at any point along those lines, then we're helping her choose life for her baby. And I'm not going to be too narrow about that, because I want to take every opportunity to redirect someone who, without intervention, would end in abortion.
Totally. So if I was to steel man your argument, basically what you're saying is that it's not just the women who say at intake, I want an abortion, walk out saying, I'm going to keep the baby. It's the women who said that they plan to carry. You provided resources and support that you don't even know. Had they not received those, might they not have switched to abortion, determined later on down the line, and gone through with that abortion? Is that about accurate?
Not quite. You said plan to carry. Like, okay, so I would agree if I could agree that that's a definition. I wouldn't necessarily celebrate. Yay, that's a life saved that wouldn't have been otherwise. No, because I mean, she was planning to carry, and we reinforced that decision. Then that's a win. So maybe those wouldn't qualify as a life saved, but anything else, like if she's undecided. And this is where we have to be very careful, Benjamin, because sometimes we do this to ourselves. We have a system that unfortunately kind of encourages bucket thinking, right? So that the moment that we interact with her, we put her in a bucket. And what I'm saying is what we all know, and of course we're two guys talking about women, which is always dangerous, right? That women are apt to change their mind. I don't know about you. I know you've been married now for a little while and have kids. Like, this does happen once in a while, that women change their minds. So, and if we're not careful, we put her in a bucket and we then assume, well, she's only undecided, for instance. Again, plan to carry, I would say, or she's likely to carry. That's our assessment. All right, I'll grant those. Like we're not going to necessarily live and die based upon what they do or don't do. Although we do have some research that shows for about a 10-year period, 2% of all the women who were classified as likely to carry still aborted, right? So they are still that's still a possibility. But I would work in the undecided world or in the abortion vulnerable world, of which we realize through some research that there's some right brain research that goes back that says most women, even before they become sexually active, have already kind of determined that abortion is a path that they could or should choose should something happen to them that they don't plan, right? So there is a default setting there that we need to recognize. And again, she may come to us and she may come to us early enough, she's not actually sure she's pregnant. And it's like, well, what we certainly would want to do is bring her life, communicate life values to her in those moments. Because once she determines she's pregnant, then now we might be too late. So we don't want to wait until she's abortion determined. Like that's certainly, I know that's not what you're advocating. But we would want to say that if she's undecided, that might be a better time even to introduce this. Like I'd rather redirect her earlier when she's still open to other options than when she's really like set her options being concrete. And then for which we're grateful that abortion pill reversal is a thing that we can still intervene in those moments after she's actually decided on abortion.
Yeah, and one interesting, I think, additional note to that. I'm curious if you've heard about this, but my friend Yari, who used to run a center in Ypsilanti, Michigan, she shared about how they have this system of calling these women after the appointment, and they don't stop. They never stop until they'll call them 9 months, 10 months sometimes. And one, the patients actually, believe it or not, they really liked that. They valued that. They felt really important to the staff or to the center. And they also found that the life decision rate climbed, that more women chose life who had said they were going to get an abortion later on ended up keeping the baby. And so
Yes.
sometimes we talk about how, you can't go off of just when they leave the center because they could change their mind later. And so saying
right.
that you saved a life, you're inflating the numbers, but it's interesting. You might actually be deflating the number by not following up, which I think is very fascinating, something for people to think about. I'm going to throw something out there. You tell me, tell me what you think on it. I don't think it's controversial. I think it's probably pretty mainstream at this point. I've heard it, shared by many center directors. But I think where the central point of that video came from was this observation of, there's life decisions and then there's life saves, right? In the life decision and that stat that we get, from the 80% of women who see their baby on the ultrasound machine choose life. And having pulled that from the cumulative, all women who got the ultrasound, I'm not positive. I didn't do the research on that, but my understanding was when you sample for women who came in abortion determined or undecided compared to all patients, the life decision rate is lower than everything. And so what we saw was centers reporting, at their banquets or whatever, hundreds of babies saved, women choosing life. What we didn't know behind that data is in some of these cases, 95+% of their patients were at best vulnerable, if not intending to carry. Because the fact is, if an intending woman comes in and chooses life, that's still a life decision. It's not a life save, but it's a life decision. And that's sometimes where I've seen some ambiguity, and I'm not saying it's intentional, but there's been some ambiguity in the reporting of pregnancy centers to their donors about all the life decisions that we had when, my wife went to a pregnancy center and got the ultrasound scan, and she still had to put her pregnancy intention, and she put choosing to carry, and so that got reported somewhere. And so I think all that to marry that to the marketing is both, unless you're a hyper focused pregnancy help center that only sees the abortion minded and vulnerable, and undecided, which I know many, and they're great too, but most fall into that middle ground bucket that see both. I think my point would just be that for most centers, their marketing budgets are so extremely limited you need to prioritize those dollars for the more difficult to get, undecided, and determined clients, because those vulnerable or intending to carry are much easier to get from word of mouth, community referrals, and more organic forms of marketing, versus to get a woman, especially in today's day and age, that you're fighting against the abortion pill online cartel. That's where, if I was to prioritize, I only had a couple $1,000s a month to spend, I would prioritize it there. So I think those two things was like the ambiguity of the definitions of life decision versus life save. And then just, if you've got a limited budget, where you ought to prioritize it. That would be my thesis that I would put out to this day, an encouragement to the centers. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's two big things that you identified, and let me tackle the one you raised first. The discrepancy between a life decision and life save, like again, those are terms of art, and they really require definitions. And look, we're working on some definitions. We call it part of our positive intervention metrics. We're creating a whole new kind of soup to nuts suite of metrics that we're even now testing, improving. But it's causing us to really relook at the assessment process. But primarily, Benjamin, one of the pieces that I think you missed in your how you were kind of unpacking it, you got all the pieces I would agree with, but there was a big piece that you're missing, and it's the fact that there's a whole group of people that we don't follow through. Not all the centers are able to do what Yari does, right? Continue that follow up, and so what we have to rely on is kind of their last stated intention. Like the last thing they told us. And here's the beauty that I think that when some of us are so close to it, but we can't step back and see it, and you will certainly agree, because you really can't do otherwise. Otherwise, your wife will be unhappy with you. But women are powerful, and they're actually quite capable. Feminism tells them that they're very strong as long as they have abortion. Well, I think that they're strong without abortion, right? Because they are able to accomplish things, and sometimes all that they need is that little bit of moment where we tell them, you can do this. We give them the gift of belief. We believe in them because, you know what? We know something that they don't always understand, is that there is another entity that's involved in this whole conversation, and it is the God of the universe. And that the God of the universe has empowered them and chosen this moment for their child. And so often women just need that brief shot of encouragement, cheerleading, bolster them, and they go back and they begin to make it happen. They create the networks. Their family comes around them. They make it happen. I'm amazed at how many times it happens. So, like you said, I was the center director. I remember so specifically, a woman came in. She was pushing a stroller. She had a little tow-headed kid. I forget his name, but he was a boy. And little Johnny was there, and he says, you don't remember me, but I was in here 2.5 years ago, and I told the person that I was talking to that I was going to abort this child, and yet I heard what you said, and I took it to heart, and I chose life, and this is that life. And it's like, we don't know those things because we lose that contact with them. So there is a truth to the fact that we are far more resilient than sometimes our own data shows us. And frankly, we can't get outside of our own data. That's one of our problems. We can't get outside of the things that we're already calculating. So there is a lot more to be had there, and I would agree that we need to keep those in mind and not be as worried about overstating some numbers. I mean, I don't want to do that intentionally. I don't necessarily agree that a planning to carry is a life decision or a life save if they came in that way. But the rest of them, I think I would. But the bigger point that you made at the end there regarding marketing, I totally agree with that and said it earlier. It's like, yes, we should direct our marketing dollars towards the woman who's actively planning to abort and seeking abortion. She's abortion minded or determined, however you define those things. They're part of the same group as far as I'm concerned, because I believe, like you said, other forces will help bring the vulnerable women in or the undecided women in. But guess what? The undecided could also be looking, she is truly undecided, but she's also could be looking for abortion. But our little bucket would put her in an undecided world. But the marketing that she may be capturing her attention is the very kind of marketing that you're describing, going after the being more intentional about standing up to those that are getting the right search terms that's really driving us for the abortion tournament. We will capture more of the undecided with that marketing, but we won't do it as well if we think of them all in with our marketing dollars. So yes, let's target our marketing dollars to be as effective as possible because it will capture those other women as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's an encouragement to the centers that sometimes you turn on the marketing for them and they're not used to that and they think something's wrong because everyone who's calling is asking about abortion. And unfortunately, there's been some that turn it off, because they think that something's wrong. And I would say, no, that's a sign that you're on the right path, and those are definitely the most difficult for sure. And there is something to be said about allocating some dollars towards the clients that if you got to throw a bone to your team and actually get someone in the door and get some reps in and get practice. I get it, but no, that's
Well, I
really
wouldn't
good.
call
So
that throwing a bone to our team. I would say that that is also part of ministry, right? That we want to have the opportunity to love people, even that are truly in the valley of decision. Like in some ways, what you're arguing for is that we would have whole centers that are dedicated only to those that are actively planning to abort, meaning that they're literally searching
there's
for the
several,
abortion.
yeah, there's several of them out there. Do you disagree with that model?
I I don't disagree with the model. I disagree with that. That is the primary way that we should function. Because otherwise I would find myself in a situation where I would have a challenge of then am I turning women away who I could affect positively from not being in that situation? Oh hey, no, sorry, we're only dealing with abortion determined women today. Can you come back when you're more abortion determined? Like that
Yeah,
doesn't make
totally.
sense to me that I so partly it's like how do we do both really is
Yeah.
what I'm asking. How do we expand now when we're talking about dealing with limited resources? I get it, that we want to focus those, but when particularly when we're talking marketing dollars, but when we're talking about ministry and and speaking life into situations, we want to speak. Look, it's just like the gospel. We don't necessarily need to have we don't necessarily wait till someone has a testimony of being completely rock bottom, down and out, every evil that could have happened to them has happened to them, and then they turn to God. No, if I can reorient them earlier than that so that they don't ever experience that's a positive win as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And I think and that's why we need both. And so I respect the ones that only do that, but it's with caveats, right? The one that I'm thinking of right now is in Metro Detroit. They're surrounded by three other pregnancy centers within 15 minutes of them that they refer to. If they decide as a ministry that they're going to prioritize their very limited resources on just those determined, and they're going to refer the rest out. As long as you got great referral networks, I agree because you never know who
Oh,
that
okay.
woman.
So that's a great example, Benjamin, of like that's a coordinated effort. They're making that decision and very intentionally. I celebrate that.
Yeah.
It's when it's an intentionality that's missing that ends up missing the other women altogether. That would be problematic for me.
Totally. Yeah, I would agree. So, one of the things recently that happened, as I know you are aware, but we saw just the flip flop back and forth with the Supreme Court and the abortion pill, and you can mail it now, you can't now, you can. But one of the interesting things that immediately happened was Care FM and other abortion pill distributors immediately just pivoted to misoprostol-only abortions, which is a much more difficult drug to regulate. They use it for a number of different things. So, it just it challenges, I think, the long-term goal of, just banning the abortion pill, like that's just going to solve everything. We saw that they don't care about women's health. They don't mind them giving labor to a baby that hasn't died yet, right? Because that's
That's right.
ultimately what's the big risk there when you're skipping the mifepristone. So, what would you say is a long-term uh, winning strategy with that in mind that they're just going to pivot, even if we do get a win there?
Well, we'll take any win we can, right? The same argument was back in 1996 when they finally outlawed one of the late-term abortion procedures, right? So, of course, then the big abortion shifted to the other. ultimately, is there a comprehensive answer? Some of our friends would say, "Oh, just pass this type of law or that type of law, and it'll make it work." You and I both know, like abortion is a function of sin in our society. It's a function of a lack of faith. It has other elements besides just the law. If the law were fully capable of accomplishing what we needed to do, we would have had no need for Jesus to come down and do what he did, right, to fulfill the law, because we learned throughout the entire Old Testament that the law is flawed in its ability to control behavior, and that's why we need internal a transformation, as is we would say, relative to the power of Scripture and a power of the gospel at work, the word at work. So laws are going to have always have their limitations, but I celebrate any and every win where we push back on big abortion, and they expose themselves when they do something as stupid as making misoprostol-only abortions, because we know that like, look, they're like you said, they don't care about women's health. They're gonna tell her, just keep taking this drug until it happens. Like, that's crazy. That's also not FDA approved, by the way. That they have the cover of the FDA right now, which is also a travesty given what the FDA already knows and should have acted on already. But until our entire legal structure, and that includes our government, right? That's just not law enforcement. That's our government has the will to celebrate life in its law, cherish it in its all of its forms. Then we're going to have this battle going on from a legal perspective, and that's why pregnancy centers are still so important, right? We're going to be able to meet those women who are being told, yes, do this, take this drug that just causes you to expel the baby, regardless of where the baby's at, right? In their development. Like, that's going to be crazy. It's going to be difficult, but any win and every win we can gain, we should take and keep moving forward till life is cherished, both in law and in our culture.
I agree with that. Yeah, so you kind of alluded to it, but obviously a lot of division going on in the pro life movement. A lot of it has to do with equal protection laws and things like that. But you had made a comment about a position that you hold that might not be not everyone agrees with, and you said that the pro life movement is not fragmented, but it's specialized. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I get this, the question of fragmentation of the pro-life movement has been around for a long time, but even before the most recent conversations. And look, we have the privilege of being Heartbeat International, and as a part of Heartbeat International, we get to go and visit with our good friends in other parts of the world who do not have a very developed pro-life movement, and so it's not uncommon for me to talk to. I can think of some pregnancy center leaders, particularly like in Eastern Europe and some of our other countries, where they are everything. They are the pregnancy center. They're seeing clients in the morning. They might be in front of Parliament in the afternoon and talking to the reporters in the evening, and they're everything. And so that's when I look back on the U.S. pro-life movement and say, you know what? We may look fragmented, but I celebrate the fact that the Lord gives us the privilege and the opportunity to be specialists. So I can be a specialist in pregnancy help. We can be specialized helping, just on the ground, helping women. As someone said, pregnancy centers aren't here to stop abortion, but we are here to stop abortions, right? We're doing it one woman at a time. The law, whether we're in an abortion state or a life state, it won't matter to us, because we're just trying to help that one woman not choose it. Because the truth is, she can do it in either one of those, right? She can do it in a life state, and she can certainly do it in an abortion state. But pregnancy help is there to help her make that decision. And the rest of the conversation are really political ones. And again, until we have the will as a people to value and cherish life, God, the way that God does, we will always be struggling with the right kind of law that will affect a person's heart, or any heart who is already set against God, right? That's going to be a challenge no matter what.
I do like that idea of being specialized. A lot of people talk about the infighting in the pro life movement and how it's a bad thing and there's too much of it. Um, I would be a little bit more specific. I would say, you got, well, a great example would be these people on the political side who are advocating for, let's say, equal protection laws or whatnot,
Yeah.
really coming after pregnancy help centers. My favorite, and by favorite I mean it's appalling, is them ridiculing centers who won't call abortion murder in the counseling room. But that is really people in one specialized area, right or wrong. They're specializing in law, getting into a totally different area and trying to tell them what they're supposed to be doing when it's really not
Well
their area
said.
of expertise. They have no
Well
idea.
said.
Um, so I think that
Well,
kind
but
of
by the way, they're appealing to the political process.
Mhm.
And that's fine. Like that's a political strategy. You think that that's going to win? I'm not convinced, by the way, but you think it does? Like, great, try that. That's only possible now because of Dobbs and because we have some life states and we have states that are actively. But that's never going to fly in an abortion state. It's certainly not going to work in a country that's, say, communist, right? These are things that are working against each other. These are political conversations, and we can have political conversations. But this is one of the reasons why I'm in this movement in where I'm at. Look, I got started by getting arrested, right? I sat out in front of abortion clinics. I had that experience, went to jail, spent a weekend in jail. In fact, first time I ever heard about pregnancy centers, I was actually in jail, and learning about like what there's another way to do this. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is while politics has failed us to come up with a definitive answer long term, we still need pregnancy help working every single day to help women choose life. That's been true since Roe versus Wade, and even before Roe, when certain states started legalizing abortion, like Colorado in '67. So we've been having this conversation for 55 years, right? On what's going to work politically. There has been no definitive political answer, and equal protection is one of those as well. It's not definitive. This is conjecture as to what it will actually do if it's even successful. Huge questions. But meanwhile, tomorrow, none of those laws are working to fully protect women. So pregnancy help needs to be there to help intervene in her walk so that she has a chance to choose life.
Yeah, I agree. So, if it's somebody in the political realm wants to, I think the bickering from the political realm over to pregnancy help movement, or, whether it be apologetics and them bickering with media, I have no idea. There's so many different, right, specialized factions, but yeah, that's generally not productive. What I do think, and it's sort of the purpose of this podcast as well, is beneficial, is mining for conflict within the specialties and really letting the best ideas duke it out and win. Sort of, just really laser focused. So, for example, people who are, you know, I run a pregnancy help center. This person runs a pregnancy help center, and they want to debate something very specific to pregnancy help centers and what's best practice and should you do this or should you not. For
Oh,
example,
hold on,
uh,
hold on, hold on. You just hit a word that I just rankles me. When you say best practices, there's a whole lot of weight that comes behind that phrase. We throw it around because it's good business jargon and it sounds really cool when we say I do best practices. But let's understand what best practices actually is. It means I've evaluated many practices and I've discarded some in favor of one, right? And this is one of the challenges where you can't have both of those things happening where you have innovation, trying new things, figuring out new stuff. Because at one time, the best practice was a buggy whip and a typewriter, right? Those were best practices at one time. But we're in a highly dynamic life, right? I mean, the culture right now is changing. The technologies are changing. All kinds of things are changing. So even that term best practices, it could vary from one community to another because the
what term
needs
do
are
you like
different.
better? What's the term, like a one or two word alternative?
Well, I mean, we would have good practices, or we'd be seeking for the best practice or emerging
Effective.
practices, and
Yeah, I'm
any of
looking
those.
for a lot of people are, it's all coming from people want to be as effective as they can be. So,
Certainly.
point being, I'm interested in what two pregnancy center leaders have to say about whether or not to share the gospel. I don't really care about what the abolitionists think about whether to share the gospel in the
I
counseling setting.
I'm with you. Totally with you on that.
So, does Heartbeat have a position on equal protection laws?
So we would say that look, pregnancy help organizations really cannot remain harbors of hope and openly advocate for criminalizing women who are seeking abortions. Like that, those are two contrary things that at some point will come to light. If you're doing that as a local pregnancy help organization, and you're doing it publicly, then it's going to be at odds at some point in the fact that you are in a position of trying to attract women. So if you're going to attract them and also advocate criminalize their actions relative to abortion, that those things work at odds. And I would say that an organization cannot do that. Now, at the same time, we can work together, right? We can be in, you and I could, for instance, we could be on the same board and have some different opinions. That's usually the way it works best. We're not so much mining for controversy as we're realizing we can work together and still accomplish life-saving ministry, even though we stand in different parts of the political spectrum.
Fair. Yeah. I hope that we could work together with, not everybody wants to work together if you don't prescribe to their exact way of doing things.
Well, that's the church at large, right, Benjamin? I mean, that's why we have so many denominations.
True. It's not specific to the pro-life movement. The mission world, no matter what, where humans are involved, there's going to be there's going to be ego, but there's going to be pride, just all sorts of things.
Well, let's set aside the pride and ego. I mean, you're right. Those are realities because we're humans. But I would say we have good reasons for believing what we believe, and we're challenged when someone else believes something different. But the power of the call to do this work can overcome all of those things. Like, we can still work together. It's like, and I would say that, look, the church is our farm team, right? I mean, this is where we come from. That we are the church in action. You imagine, like, in any town, there's some intersection where on each corner there's a different kind of church. But the Pregnancy Help movement is where people from any of those churches can work together to see lives saved and hearts touched. Like, this is one of the beauties that I have found about the Pregnancy Help movement, is that it allows us to to effectively come together and focus on the life-saving ministry of helping people say yes to the baby that God has already given them. And that is something we can all do. Wherever we come at on the church spectrum, we can all step into that ministry and say yes and amen to that mission.
Amen to that. Jor-El, how long have you been working in the movement?
Oh, this is my 35th year, Benjamin.
Okay. I thought it was a long time.
Yep.
What would be your advice? I mean, just how do you work in the movement for 35 years and not become jaded?
Well, I can't say I'm not jaded. I get frustrated at the politics, but I'm grateful that every day lives are saved because of the work that we do, and that's what keeps me going. I think we'll never know this side of heaven what kind of impact we've actually had, and it's more than just the lives saved. That was what we were talking about earlier. But when we do that, we are touching lifetimes, and then beyond that, we're touching lineage. The women that I helped in my center back 35 years ago, like, they are likely they might have grandchildren now, and then those lives go on, and that we realize that, look, the work that we do today makes a difference in a big way, not just for the days ahead, but for the generations ahead.
For the generations. That's my favorite quote from
Perfect.
Schindler's List. There will be generations because of what you did. Love that.
Amen.
Well,
Amen.
what can people do, for Heartbeat? What are you most excited about? What do you want to talk about, promote, as we come to a close here for the pro-life leaders who are listening? What are you most pumped about?
Well, if you're in the Pregnancy Help movement, hey, dial in. We're doing some stuff. Like I said, we launched some initiatives that help with this. Our Abortion Pill Rescue Network is a part of that. If you don't know about that, please know more. But pray for us. We're in a couple of big battles. We're in a battle with the Attorney General of the state of California over abortion pill reversal, and then also in a battle with the state of New York, along with several affiliates in both instances. Pray for us, because these are big things, and they'll make a big difference for generations to come.
Will do. Thanks, Jor-El.
Thank you, my friend.